3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Mr. Abdulahad, are we ready?
Yep, I think everyone's here. And just, you know, Miss Scott could not turn on her webcam right now. She did notify us. So just for the record, and I'll start recording when you're ready, Miss Holder.
No, we're ready. And I
Okay.
apologize for the delay.
All right.
So we are here on February 25th for a study session starting at 6 p.m. I don't have an agenda, so I am going to introduce Miss Debbie Stair. She's the one that's going to be hosting this, correct?
Miss Holder, I think we should do the Pledge of Allegiance and then the public comments, and then we could introduce the
Oh,
yes.
all right. Fair enough. We can do Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have a volunteer? How about Crystal?
Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, and I'm going to open it to public comment. I do not have this sheet, so
excuse
I think
me,
everybody kind of knows.
Excuse me, Madam President, we have to do roll call.
Miss Scott.
Here.
Okay.
You want me to do it, Cindy?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. That's okay. Mrs. Beaver. Here. Mrs. Thompson. Oh, she's muted. Here. Mrs. Chambliss. Here. Mrs. Scott.
Here.
Mr. Holcomb.
Here.
And Mrs. Holder.
Here.
And I am here. Okay.
Okay. Now we are ready for Mrs. Stair. You can kind of, we have to do public comment. I am just so out of it today. I apologize. Do we have anybody that wants to address us?
Miss President Holder, I don't see anyone with their hands up.
Okay.
Hey,
With that being said, we'll move on then.
can I?
We'll close public. Oh, Mr. Holcomb, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm on my phone right now on this thing, and I want to go over to my iPad, so I'm going to drop this and go on to the iPad. I'll be right back.
Okay,
Okay.
sure.
Okay. I don't know how you.
Ms. Holder, I did send you an email while we wait for Mr. Holcomb. I did send an email about an hour and a half into the training, if we could take a 5-minute recess.
I did see that. When we get to that point, you can, somebody let me know, please.
All right, I'm back.
There we go. All right, full view. Okay. We're gonna try this one last time. Mr. Abdulahad, how about if you introduce Ms. Stair? Maybe we'll have better outcome.
Okay. Well, Debbie Stair represents MASB. We reached out to her for training, so she has a thorough training for us today. We'll be turning over the screen over to her. She'll be sharing a presentation, and I'm sure, Debbie, you'll send us a copy of that presentation after you're done.
I definitely will.
Post that as well. Time is all yours, Miss Stair.
Okay, well, thank you so much. So I don't have screen sharing rights yet, but you're probably working on that. So for those of you that I haven't met, my name is Debbie Stair. I am the Assistant Director for Leadership Development at MASB. And I've been on staff for pretty close to 7 years now. But prior to that, I was a board member like yourself. And I served in my local district over 15 years, served on an ISD board, and served on MASB's board of directors. And at the time I was doing my board service, I was actually employed by first the Superintendent's Association and then the Elementary and Middle School Principals Association. So I think it gives me a pretty broad perspective as I look at my work now, helping boards with their governance concerns. And, you know, one of the great things about this job is that during my 15 years of board service, MASB really provided so much support to me over that time. As a matter of fact, my colleagues in the office teased me about my pins and certificates, because if there was a learning opportunity, I was probably there at some point over those 15 years. And so I feel like I'm sort of giving back to an association that I got a lot from. And then I have the opportunity to pay it forward to assist boards around the state now. And I get a paycheck on top of it. And so it's sort of like the perfect trifecta, if you will. And so I feel very fortunate to do this work and to be with you here this evening. And you know, I really want to stay up front because I know you do have some audience participants here in the Zoom world that we're in. And, you know, this board should be commended for taking a proactive approach, right, to their learning and to their effectiveness as a governance team. And not all boards do it. It certainly is a best practice. It is one of the 8 traits of effective boards that came out of the Iowa Lighthouse Research Study. And we'll talk a little bit more about that research as we move through the evening. But again, I want to commend you for doing that. So a few things to know as we get started. One, I'm going to be working from dual monitors. So if it looks as though I'm looking away from the camera, I still promise I'm paying attention to what we're doing. I might just be checking my notes or trying to look at your camera, that, you know, your pictures, so that I feel like we're interacting to the best of our abilities, even though we're in this Zoom environment. I've had pretty good internet connectivity where I am, and so that's probably not an issue. But if for some reason you see me turn my camera off, I'm probably getting a warning that says my internet might be unstable. And so I'll usually do that, and that tends to fix the problem. Although I try not to turn off my camera because I know it's much more engaging when you're looking and speaking together, right? I'm a pretty informal person. So by all means, you know, if you have something, you know, unmute yourself, call me, you know, call me Debbie. I'm going to be calling you by your first names unless you tell me that's not appropriate. And as we heard earlier, we're going to take a break probably about halfway through our time together. So that'll give you a chance to get up and stretch or refresh your beverage of choice and that sort of thing. I will be sending the PowerPoint tomorrow, along with, we may, you know, discuss some other topics this evening that might lead to another handout. And so if that's the case, if I mention a handout, then I'll include that in with that PowerPoint. So you know a little bit about me. And as we get started, I'd like to know a little bit about each of you. I know what our records say, which is very little, right? And so I'm going to ask you, and I'm going to sort of go around the screen. By the way, I just pinned you guys up to my box here, but I'm going to ask you if you would just, I can see your name, so you don't have to give me your name, but if you'll tell me when you were elected for the first time and why you ran for the board. Now, I don't want to hear that I did it for the kids, because that's a pretty common phrase. If that is why you ran, I want you to think a little bit past that. What was it about serving the students in your district that you felt compelled about that made you want to run for the board? And I'm also going to ask the same question of Angel, obviously in his perspective from why did he want to be the superintendent here? Okay, so I'm just going to start calling on names. And so Cindy, you are first in my lineup for right now.
Okay, so this is my actually third time around, but so I had just over 20 years before decided to run this time, honestly, because of the political climate and the uncertainty. And I wanted to support the majority of the board that was there. I thought that they were moving in the right direction. And I think in order to service the district, we needed to continue that. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. Beth, how about you?
I was voted in 2018. Couple of reasons. I wanted to ensure that myself and others had a voice and at least one vote in this community. And I have a special needs daughter in the district.
Okay. Rebecca, how about you?
I was elected this past November, and I ran mainly because I thought maybe I could bring new experience, different, thinking outside the box, ideas, different thoughts, ideas, and hopefully just make the district even better.
That there needed to be some change in the current board, the current, just school district. So that's why I ran.
Okay. Mark, how about you?
Well, I was appointed a year ago, I think January or February, and then I won an election in November. And I run, main reason I run is because I believe the students that don't go to college deserve an opportunity. And I'm setting up skilled trade stuff with operators, engineers, and iron workers for apprenticeship programs. And that's basically it.
Okay. Crystal.
Hi, Debbie. Nice to meet you. I'm Crystal. I was just elected in November as well. I'm a mom to 5 kids in the district. And so when election time came around, I had a student in every building, and there was just some things as a parent that I wanted to see change and improve on. We have a great district, but I feel like there was room for improvement. And so I'm the type of person that I'm not going to just sit around and complain about something. And so I felt this was my next step to.
Okay, perfect. And
try to
Angel, how
improve.
about you?
Debbie, I went into education, frankly, because I didn't want what happened to me to happen to any other student. The experiences that I had as a child going in education, I had a bad experience and I didn't want that. So I've been in education since 2001, and I've had the same mindset that I'm not going to let the kids go unserviced. And so that's what's driven me to this point in my career.
Okay, perfect. Well, thank you all for being willing to share that. Angel, you almost gave me a perfect activity later about experiences in K-12 that each of us had.
Did Mrs. Thompson speak?
No.
Did I skip you? I'm sorry. I moved your picture and then I forgot to call on you. How bad am I?
Good catch, Deb.
Sorry.
Hi, Deb. My name is Gloria Thompson. Obviously, I was elected in 2018. I originally ran because of the political climate going on in the district at the time. I had 30 years invested in the district, working in the district. I was retired for 15, 20 years and started noticing some things that I thought were off and thought maybe I should get involved and see if I can't move the district along in a different direction. And this is mine going into my 3rd year, and I've been treasurer the whole time I've been on the board.
Okay. I promise not to skip you again. Like I said, I was moving the pictures so I'd have all of you in one place so that you weren't intermixed with the others. And then somehow or another that changed. And so I guess I didn't pin it quite properly. You know, even though I've been using Zoom since last March, you know, I'm still learning new tips and tricks. And every time they update, you know, we have to relearn something. So, all right. So hopefully, can you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, and you don't see the notes function, you just see the screen with just the, okay, perfect. So we're going to talk a lot tonight, and you're going to hear me say governance team numerous times. And when MASB talks about a governance team, we're really talking about the 8 members of a team. And that may sound a little funny because there's only 7 elected officials, right? But we really feel as though your superintendent is a part of that governance team and that team of 8. Now, you have very different and distinct roles from the superintendent. And we're going to talk about some of those tonight. But it really is the combination of you all working together, right, in this work that you do leading a district that makes for an effective team. And so that's when you hear me say governance team, I'm always referring to the superintendent in that as well. All right, so who's my volunteer to read this for us?
I'll volunteer.
Okay.
A team is a group of people with different backgrounds, skills, personalities, and styles with a common purpose who are working together to achieve clearly identified goals.
All right, and so does that sound like this group?
Hopefully,
Pretty
yes.
much.
So what sort of sticks out to you there about this particular phrase?
I will answer. I'll be the first at any rate. I know that we have, I believe that all of us have the same goal, and I have said this to the others as well. I think we definitely have different paths that we think it's going to take to get, to get there. But I do think that the common goal of moving the district forward and making more opportunities is something all 7 of us do share.
Okay. How about somebody else?
I believe that we all do come from different backgrounds and our skills and personalities and styles. And I think that's what's going to help us build what some might see as one, the other person will see as something else, and we can work together for the common purpose and achieve our goals.
Yeah, absolutely. And interestingly enough, when school boards were originally developed, right, and set up back in the 1700s, it really was all about those varying perspectives that a group of citizens would bring to the role of governance and to act as a liaison between the professional educators and the community. With that role of oversight as their responsibility. And so those various perspectives and experiences and backgrounds that you all bring to the table are valuable. And much like you said, Debbie, hopefully it's that variety that actually gets to a solution, right, that is better than any one person would have thought of on their own. Have any of you ever participated in an activity where you were supposedly stranded, your plane crashed, or you were in an earthquake, and you had this list of items that you had to rate and rank as to what things you would take with you, and you could only take so many things? Has anybody ever participated in something like that? They're good little team building exercises, and what happens is that you as an individual will rate the items that you would choose that you think would be important for whatever reasons, right? And you would get a score for that. And then you would take a group of individuals, put them together and have them discuss what they should take with them. And almost in every case, then that group score would be higher than any individual's. And that's because you are getting the best thinking of everybody at the table, right? And that's really what we're hoping that you all get as a benefit, and the district benefits from, is the best thinking of all of you. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I bet you guys all thought, you know, I've had a full day. I'm just going to kind of come tonight and sort of sit back and listen, hear what she has to say. Nope, I'm going to make you do a lot of talking. So let's get that straight right now. So, you know, hopefully you'll feel comfortable kind of joining in, and know that at some point in the you know, our time together, I'm going to call on you, and hopefully you're okay with that. But I do think it's the richness of the discussion that you get to have tonight that is important, and that will lead to a more effective team, regardless of how effective you currently are or not, right? But is the board table set up for conversations like this?
I
No.
think it has. Go ahead, Beth.
I don't, is it set up to talk like for study sessions, or?
Yeah, just have a good conversation, even about something as simple as what a team looks like.
Not as of yet.
Other perspectives on that?
I do think from just watching as a participant in the last few years as to being here now, there's more discussion that's happening at the table than in previous years.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking, but I thought you meant training wise, Debbie.
Yeah, you know, I really just mean an opportunity to converse with each other. Right? And the board table is really set up for you to all come in, do the business of the district, and then go home, right? And there's not a lot of opportunity for just good conversation about things that help to build the relationship that really helps a team as they tackle difficult things. What we find from research is that the better you all know each other and the more positive your relationship amongst the group, the more likely you are to deal with difficult topics in a positive way. And so, you know, that's one of the reasons why a workshop like this is such a great idea. It's an opportunity to not have to deal with business tonight, and just to, you know, do some learning together, have some conversation, share some perspectives, listen to your colleagues share theirs, right? And again, start forming that relationship of a cohesive team. And that's really what we're all about tonight. We're going to give you some best practices too, and they'll be woven in, but it's really a combination of those two things that I'm hoping that we accomplish. All right, so for those of you who may never have seen this before, this is based on Tuckman's stages of group development. And notice at the bottom, I'm going to give a disclaimer. It says there are 5 stages. We're only looking at 4. And that's because the 5th stage is about completing your work and disbanding. And that doesn't happen for a Board of Education. So it's not even pertinent to our conversation. But I want you to take a little bit of time, and I'm going to be quiet in a minute and give you some time. I want you to take some time and read these statements, and then I'm going to ask each of you to identify where you feel this governance team finds themselves most often. Now, there is movement back and forth between these categories, but for the most part, you kind of usually fall somewhere along one of those lines. And for those of you who were just newly elected, right, you don't have a lot of perspective from sitting at the board table yet. And so if you feel like you need to sort of reach back to when you were a community member watching the board over the past 12 months, say, then you can use that perspective as well. Okay, so I'll be quiet, let you read for a couple minutes. If you get to a point where you think you're done, give me maybe a thumbs up or a head nod. And when I see enough of you, we'll move on. How are we doing? Have we kind of gotten an idea which one we're going to share? See a couple heads nodding. Thumbs up. Okay. All right. So I'm going to ask each one of you to share. And when you share, I would like to give, a reason why you selected that. And it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's written there on the slide. It can be something that describes that, right? Something that you experience that sort of points out that's why it fits in that category. All right. So I'm going to start with somebody different this time because Cindy was brave and I made her go first last time. And I don't want to forget Gloria. So Gloria, you get to go first.
Oh, thanks. Basically, I'm looking at all four of these and I'm seeing that we're still in the forming stage. We're kind of have been a split board for a long time. We're a group of individuals. We don't always have clear purpose. We don't always agree on things. And I would love to see this board turn into performing where we're an aligned team with vision and purpose, but I'm still seeing us at the forming stage. And I don't know how to pull us out of that because we have a split board.
Okay, but and so when you say split, I'm assuming that means a 4-3. Is that right? For the most part?
Well, yeah.
Okay. And is it always the same groups?
Yes.
Okay. There's certainly, you can have differences of opinions. It's how those differences are handled that puts you in whatever category you're in, right? And so even if you look at the performing stage, the last bullet point is a healthy conflict, right? It doesn't mean you're all seven always going to agree on everything, but it does talk to how you disagree, how you move forward together when that disagreement comes up, right? Thanks. Rebecca, how about you?
I agree. I think we're still in the forming stage. I think that, it'd be great if we were at least closer to like norming where, we're making progress and we're understanding what we all contribute to the group and what we all bring to it and, respect each other's differences and, we're at that part, but I do think we're still at the forming stage.
Okay. Debbie?
I have to agree. I think we're still in the forming stage. I think that we struggle sometimes in trusting each other, valuing each other's vote, valuing each other's opinion. And I truly would like to see us in the norming stage, between the norming and performing stage. But I think we've got new board members. We still have some old board members that still have issues. We have to leave the outside influences outside and try to all work together so that we can be storming, norming, and performing.
Okay. Mark, how about you?
Well, I believe we're between forming and storming. I think we don't trust one another, but I believe that a lot of that is when all of a sudden you see things posted on Facebook that are not true stories or whatever. Just because people don't belong to the groups that you belong to, don't think that it don't get back to people, because it does. That don't help matters. If you want people to trust you, we all got to stop doing this. I mean, I'm not naming names. I'm just saying, if you want people to believe and trust in you, we got to stop this.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Crystal, how
I
about
would
you?
definitely agree that we're in the forming stage. Up until 2 weeks ago, goals have never even been mentioned by this group. And even going back further than the 2 years. I think the problem is a lot of people are not listening to understand one another. They're listening to try to catch somebody up in something and kind of hold something up against somebody like it's a, I don't know, like a conspiracy theory all the time, rather than listening to understand where someone's perspective is and where they're coming from. It's always, there's not that trust, right? So I think we're in the forming stage.
Okay. Beth, how about you?
Yes. Okay, so I probably have a different perspective than all of them. I was in the minority on the last, before January. I'm basically in the middle. So I'm gonna have to say that I am at the forming to the norming. So let me explain. For the longest time, we were in the forming and storming and back to forming the previous 2 years. But I think that now we're trying to figure out how we're going to do things. Cindy's done a great job of letting all of us, giving us fair chances all to speak, which was one of my problems previously. Trust is definitely one of our biggest problems. Also that we bring up past board admins, stuff gets brought up, the blame gets put on past boards, past administrations for years, not just 4 years, 2 years, 4 years, back 15, 20 years ago. It gets brought up. This district is forever has been stuck in that mode. And I think one of our biggest problems is that we don't have a vision. We don't have a statement. We don't have goals for the superintendent. We can't get to all the way to norming or performing unless we have goals that we're to reach. I feel like we're stuck at there's no goals. I mean, honestly, that's where I feel. So I feel we're a lot of mostly been going into the norm because we're trying to figure everything out. And I think we're trying to do the best we can to get to that. And that's how I feel.
Okay. Cindy.
I kind of think we're between the forming, more forming than storming, but definitely there is struggle and conflict. Like I said, I had been on the board for a while and then I was gone for a bit and now I'm back, and things that were routine and normal are gone. So we have to build a new foundation. It's, I hate to even say, but just the goal struggle when to try and set up the meeting, it's like, we all have different goals. Normally we would have all done this multiple times and it would have been easier. We're all, I want to say struggling, we're all trying very hard. But we don't have the original foundation that just was broken. And anybody that came in after that didn't have the advantage of the routine and the understanding of places. And even the superintendent came in with no superintendent experience. So even as hard as he's working, we're all learning, relearning, and we need to become more focused because they're right. We have to, at a minimum soon, we have to get a list of goals for Angel, for ourselves. And if you can help get us there, I think we all want to. I just don't know if we know how. And like I said, normally when you're voted onto a board, all of that protocol and procedures already in place. You just learn your spot in it. And because the past has kind of broken that. And then everybody was doing, honestly, I'm not blaming the soul. Everybody was doing the best they could. Now we're trying to get back to some sort of normalcy. and so it's a struggle.
Okay, all right, thank you. Angel, I made you wait till last again. I promise not to do that every time. How about your perspective?
I look at things differently. I look at each trustee and I see the value they bring into the table. I look at everyone's strengths, and even though I answer to them, I see what role they play in the team. I do see they have a lot of common things and common values, but sometimes I think coming together is a struggle for everyone. And frankly, if I had a magic wand to wave so we could all get us to work together, I would have that. But everyone is doing the best they can. And I look at everyone, and everyone is putting in 100% into this position. I see that from my perspective. It's just, how do we help each other see the value that the next person brings to the table?
Yeah. And so do you sort of agree with the rest of the group as far as that sort of storming area as a whole?
Yeah, I think we're around storming. For me, I think we're around there right now. I think certain people understand what we have to get to, but as a whole board, maybe not everyone sees what we have to get to. But I think some trustees understand where we need to be, and but I also know that there's a power struggle with amongst the board as well.
Okay, thank you. Well, you talk about being a split board, but think about what you just told me. There's more unification here than you would think, right? You all said that you are down in those, first couple of stages. And you recognize that there's work to be done. And so, that's a first step, right? In recognizing, here's where we are. Let's all be honest about where we are. And then now let's try and, figure out some of the things that can help move us into those higher stages. Now, obviously, for a group who feels that they find themselves most often in the forming and storming area, we're not going to jump to performing overnight, right? It's not going to happen because a number of you brought up the lack of trust that exists amongst this governance team. And is trust something that is built overnight?
No.
Takes a long time, doesn't it? And how quick, though, does trust disappear?
Very
Super fast.
Yeah, a single sentence could
Right.
destroy someone's trust.
And so imagine, let me get a piece of paper here. If we were together and this was a topic, I would give you each a piece of paper and I would ask you to crumple it up. And this piece of paper represents trust, right? And so somebody did something, doesn't matter which thing it is or which person, but somebody did something to break the trust. And so it gets crumpled. And then we work at it for a while, and so it gets a little bit straightened out. And then lo and behold, somebody different does something else, right? And that continues to happen. Does this piece of paper ever go back to its original nice, neat, clean? No, it doesn't. And that's part of the work of trust building. is that you really have to think, and we can only control our own actions, right? We can't control others. We react to others, but that's again up to us. And so we actually have to think to ourselves and do that sort of think before we act. Is what I'm about to do gonna help build the trust, or is what I'm about to do gonna break it down in some way? Is that something that everybody thinks they could kind of self-monitor their own behaviors around? So Mark, you mentioned putting something on Facebook. You know, Cindy, I think you talked, or maybe it wasn't you. Somebody mentioned dwelling on the past, that we spend too much time, you know, rehashing all this old stuff, right? If each time something like that happens, and before I speak or make an action around one of those things, or any number of things that break trust, if I said to myself, will this have a positive effect or a negative effect? What do you think that could do to your level of trust with each other?
It would build trust, I believe.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds so simple, and I know it's not, right? Because we all react to things in our surroundings and in our situations. But if we can really sort of take those measured steps and just sort of step back, right? It's kind of like, have you ever heard, you know, you type an email and when you're, you know, mad, right? You don't send it right away. You let it sit in your drafts for about 24 hours when you've had time to think about it, and then reread it. And then usually you don't send it in quite the same language that you initially typed it out at, right? Because you've calmed down. You've sort of had some time to think about the perspective a little bit, and you've gotten a little distance from it. Well, I would start asking you to think about some of those activities that others have mentioned around trust and how it gets broken, and start trying to take just that moment to say, if I do this, what does this do to our governance team? Another thing that I think would really be helpful for this group, and somebody talked about, how did you say it? Somebody said about listening to understand, that people don't necessarily do that. And honestly, we're all really bad at listening. Human nature is just bad at listening. And part of the reason for that is that about halfway through what somebody's saying to us, what do you think we start doing?
Either daydream or anticipate what they're gonna say next.
Prepare a response. I was thinking the same thing, Cindy, yeah.
Right.
Response.
Most often we tune out the second half of what someone has to say because we are busy formulating what our response is going to be. Now, for people who are verbal processors, and we do some behavioral assessments, and that's a great workshop for a board that seems to be having trust issues and just, you know, finding the value in each other. But for those folks who are verbal processors, the most important part of what they're trying to share with you might not come till the second half. If you've already started formulating your response, you're missing the most important point, right? And so again, one of the things we can do as individuals is we can sort of step back and in our mind say, finish listening. Finish listening to what they have to say. And the part two of this is to assume positive intent. Every one of you talked about wanting to make a positive difference, a positive difference, right, for your students. So knowing that about each other, even if we differ in the paths, somebody mentioned we have different paths to get there, right? But if we know that we're all here to do good work, to benefit our community and our students, then we ought to be able to give some to assume some positive intent. And the reason I think that's so important is because you listen differently if that's the lens you're listening through. Right? The person on the other side of the issue isn't trying to be difficult. They're bringing their perspective to the table and they're trying to make you understand what it is. And so if you can assume the positive intent, you will ask different questions and you will likely be able to find some common ground, even in your differences of opinion. Right? You can be on opposite ends of the spectrum and you can find some commonality if you try. Not the other person. This is all strictly what you can do, right? Because a lot of times we're like, well, if that other person would just change and do it this way or that way, right? Everything would be better. The thing is you can't ever depend on the other person. So the only one you can control is you. So if you approach it differently, then likely their response to you is going to look different, right? And now you're headed in a positive direction instead of the negative one that is so quick to happen. So what do you think about that? Assume positive intent and listening to understand.
It sounds easy.
I know. It's hard in the heat of the moment, isn't it?
It is, especially when you're so passionate about a certain subject and you feel like others are just blowing you off. So it is hard. It's easier said than done for sure.
Yeah. And it takes practice, right? It's like most everything we do in life. The first few times we do it, we're not going to do it so great. And we're going to fumble a little bit. We might not have quite the right words and it might feel awkward. But over time, when you practice it and you get better at it and you see the positive outcome from it, it gives you more confidence to do it again, right? And each time you get a little bit better at it. And each time there's a little less of that tension that you feel when you're on opposite sides of things, right? Because you have a better understanding of where the other person is coming from. So let's take a look. You sort of led me into our next activity. And this is the one where Angel kind of didn't realize he was giving me a nice transition earlier. So I want you to think back. And for some of us, like myself, it's a longer journey in our thinking back. But I want you to think back to your experience as a K-12 student. So Gloria, not your time, working for the district or others' time as parents. I don't want you to think about it in that respect. I want you to think about your experience as a K-12 student. And what is it that is most memorable to you?
Most memorable.
Most memorable. Like, what's the thing that really pops into your brain? It might be positive, it might be negative, but when you think back to your days as a student, this is what just jumps out.
Some of the teachers that I had.
Okay.
For instance, first and second grade, my first grade teacher enjoyed her class so much she requested the same students the second year. So I had her 2 years in a row. As I progressed through school, I had teachers who recognized my abilities and focused on those and helped me move along, where I didn't necessarily have that in my home atmosphere. Most of my memories, K through 12, were of teachers that I enjoyed being with.
Okay.
And they were a big influence on me.
Okay, thank you. Mark, how about you?
I guess my best memory of school was in junior high. I had a teacher, Mr. Pankey, great guy. He, me and another guy was wrestling around in the class, and being typical junior high kids, you boys, we were wrestling around, fighting one another. And he looked at me, and he was a bodybuilder, and he made a muscle in his one arm and says, Holcomb, if you don't sit down, he says, you're going to either meet Beaumont or you're going to meet Whitechapel. he was character, but he's my favorite teacher.
Okay. Crystal, how about you?
I wish I would have went first because now I feel like I'm stealing their conversation. But I was a very shy student, so I didn't do a lot of, extracurriculars or sports or anything like that. So when I think back from when I was in school, it's definitely those few teachers that kind of stand out, the relationships that I had with a few of them that kind of went that extra mile to make me feel special and loved at school, from where I didn't have that, sports club or whatever to be a part of. So.
Okay. Beth, how about you?
So I graduated from Madison, so went there K through 12. So my teachers, principal, and superintendents were all supportive. I was very involved. We had a lot of activities. I was in, band and cheerleading, softball, track. Some of my lifetime friendships have come from, my sports and activities. And I always felt that I could go to any one of my teachers and they were supportive to me.
Okay, great. Thank you. Angel, how about you?
So, Debbie, I had the complete opposite experience. I immigrated here from Iraq. In 1982, I moved to Spain. We lived there for about 5 years. Then I came here in 1986. The first grade I ever attended was 5th grade. I never attended school before that. And the only thing that echoed in my ear was a teacher calling me a loser and that I would never amount to anything. And I just remember that horrible feeling that I had. And I made a promise to myself that I would never let anything like that ever happen to anyone again. So when I looked at careers, I said, how can I ensure that what happened to me would never happen to anyone else? So I went into teaching, and that was my goal, that I was never going to let anyone that I service feel the way that I felt. So I took that horrible experience that I had, and I just used that to motivate me, and it's been my driving vision in my career. Since 01, I've been, I was a teacher, and then I became a principal and a superintendent. And I always look at that. If you talk to any teacher that was ever worked with me as a principal, I always side with the teachers, with the students, I'm sorry. I always try to give the kids the benefit of the doubt because I never had that. I never, our voice was always silenced. So I just vowed to myself that I would never let that happen to another student. So that's what motivated me to be here today.
Thank you. Rebecca, how about you?
I had a little bit more similar of a situation to Angel than the rest. I was in a small district, and I was doing great and everything was going fine. I was a straight A student, but I was failing in high school because of attendance. And I wasn't getting any credit for my courses, even though I had A's in the classes. On my 16th birthday, I found out that I could drop out of high school. And I walked in the counselor's office, dropped out, no questions asked. Nobody stopped me. Nobody even asked why. They just literally handed me the form. I signed it and I walked out. They didn't even call my parents. So it was just, I had a really rough time. And a lot of it was because I was ADHD. I had just a lot going on inside my head. And, I got to college and I sat down with a counselor, and, I was 18 and I was like, what are my options? And they took the time and explained like how everything could be so much better in schools, and like it got me the help I needed and just made it was just a much better situation. So I think that definitely the situation or the environment that a student has in the K through 12 will make or break their educational career. So
Thank you for sharing. Cindy, how about you?
I would say I had a rough beginning. I had a teacher that didn't last very long. She liked to literally, I'm not exaggerating, she used to tie us in the chairs. And in first grade, that was a lesson to be learned. But she didn't last long, and I don't remember much about it. My folks talk about it more than I thought about it. But no, my parents were just, you better be on the honor roll or you have no privilege. And I was involved in a lot of sports and activities. And so I didn't have, a couple of teachers that we were more close to than others. But I was on a college track, and, the kind of kid that weighed the pros and the cons and the crime and the punishment, and punishment never seemed to look too inviting. So it was, I make many waves. I'm a go with the flow kind of gal.
Okay, thank you. And Debbie, I think you're the only one I haven't called up yet.
Okay. High school. I'm older, so I don't remember much. Elementary and junior high. High school was my best. The football games on Friday nights, the clubs, the groups. We had art club and drama club, cheerleading and all that stuff. And I think it was a camaraderie of all of us together. I don't know if anyone remembers Mr. Dean. He was the art teacher. He was amazing. And I like Beth, I went through K through 12 through the Madison schools, and we had some amazing teachers, some quirky teachers, but they made being there fun. And there was a lot more social activities and stuff, I think, when I went to school, and that's offered now. I don't know. I think it built more camaraderie and made for lasting friendships, because we were always together after school doing fun stuff together. And that's, we had class teachers. We made floats for the homecoming things. And we all 70 kids in someone's backyard making flowers out of garbage bags. I mean, it's just the stuff we did as a group. That's the stuff that sticks in my head about school.
Okay, great, thank you. So, do you all know that about each other?
No.
Do know.
Yet again, not much opportunity to have those conversations at the board table, right, when you're doing business. Do you think those stories that you all shared play a role in the way you come about making decisions and your perspectives on issues at the table?
I do.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they do. You bring all of that experience, with you to the board table. And so when, and this was pretty routine of what I see, in that for the most part, the group has somewhat positive experiences. And they talk a lot about teachers, and that was true here. But we also had some negative experiences that really sort of colored, what Angel chose to do and how Rebecca, turned things around, even though she, you wouldn't have thought maybe that was the case, right? Given the fact that she dropped out at 16. And so imagine that you're talking about, students who don't quite fit in that round or square peg, right? And, Rebecca gets pretty passionate about it. Or you're talking about, what are we doing for dropouts? Right? Or maybe we're talking about, how we handle, students of color or, different ethnicities that, are in our district, and how do we meet their needs? at times it can just seem like those folks are just being downright difficult. What is their problem? Is kind of what we're thinking when we don't know their story, right? That passion that they bring to the table when not fully understood just seems like they're hard to get along with at times. And so, you know, how does it make you feel having heard some of those stories about each other?
Debbie, this is Beth. It actually even hurts my heart even more because our school is lacking in activities and things to bring the students together. So some of the things that people are saying that has happened to them, you know, right now with COVID and, you know, the lack of activities and things in our school, it just, another reason I'm on the board, because I feel that our students aren't at the forefront in many things, not just the education, but, you know, just the whole friendship and, you know, peers and, you know, things like that, what they should be experiencing.
Yeah, a number of you mentioned the relationships, right? That you got either from the activities you participated in or from the relationships you've had with teachers. And we haven't really talked about COVID much, but you know, as you make decisions around, even those of you who had, you know, positive experiences as you look back, as you've had to make those tough decisions, that has probably played into how are we doing what we're doing right now, right? How are we offering students what they need? Again, based on our experiences and our perspectives, you know, and so that whole struggle, and I don't even know, you know, but what I've experienced in many districts across the state is a lot of the divide has been around what do we do for our kids during this time period, right? Are they online? Are they in person? Is it hybrid? And there's kind of a, you know, we believe what we believe and we're not very willing to compromise and come to some common agreement around what the right thing to do is. And let me tell you, there's no right answer. There is not a right answer that I have seen across this state. Every board and governance team has struggled with this because there's some huge contingent that you are going to make unhappy no matter what decision you make. That's been my experience. And I don't even know if that's been your experience in Madison. But it certainly has been, you know, predominantly in most districts. So I always ask this question about your K-12 experience because one, I want you to continue to see each other as people, right? And to get to know about each other. And two, I want you to try and figure out ways to get to know each other as you move through this work that you do. I want you to look for unstructured opportunities away from the board business to build your relationships with each other, with your superintendent, right? Because I truly believe that the more you do that and the better you know each other, the harder you'll work to overcome differences because you will actually come to care about each other. Debbie.
Debbie,
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You know, I've always wanted to get together in a room of one of the schools or one of our homes or something just for as a, you know, quote, social gathering with all of us. But then people start throwing OMA violations at you and you can't do this, you can't do that. Why can't we just meet as a group, not to discuss board stuff, but just to get to know each other?
Yeah, you can.
You know?
A board can get together for social occasions. But I will tell you, for a group who, you know, maybe hasn't gotten along so well, right? It probably might look a little odd in your district if that were to happen. And so you might want to start small, right?
I have a
and-
suggestion, Debbie, not to interrupt you, but last night we were in the Oakland County School Board Association meeting, and Oak Park just implemented where 20 minutes before their board meetings, they come together on Zoom before they let any of the public in. And obviously they're very strict with OMA, don't discuss any school board business, but just kind of hang out and talk, you know, kind of break the ice a little bit over Zoom.
What's
I
Powder
think that
Puff
would be a
doing, dude?
good starting point for our
Oh, he is.
board rather than, you know, jumping to, oh, let's go to dinner, or, you know, just
Well,
kind
you
of
know,
building the connections there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's a great example. So I was going to say, you know, as you come together, right, for a board meeting, there's absolutely nothing wrong with everybody getting there together, you know, maybe a half hour early and sharing a sandwich, right? Sort of calming the busy day you've had, just, you know, gathering a quick bite so that you feel refreshed before the meeting, and you're not discussing any board business.
Right.
You're simply, you know, how was your day? How was your vacation last week? How did your daughter do in the school play? Right? It's that kind of conversation. That is exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about. Going to the Oakland County School Boards Association dinner meetings when those are back, you know, to in person is a great opportunity. You're riding together in the same car, a couple of you maybe. Again, you're having the opportunity to just chit chat, right? Attending conferences together, learning activities like tonight. Those are all some of those unstructured activities that I'm suggesting that you look at.
Debbie, this is
Yeah.
Beth. So here's my perspective on this. I have definitely tried. I have offered some for coffee, been told no. I've offered some for lunch. Some have come, some have not. And because we're a split board, it often seems like 4 will do things together and the 3 are not invited, or the 3 will go to Oakland County School Board meetings and the other 4 won't. Like, it, even if it's not purposeful, it always seems purposeful because we're a split board. So
Yeah.
that we have to get past that.
Yeah.
So
And
that
so
is a
then,
problem.
yeah. And so if that's the case, right, that it really feels like it's happening, you know, in other areas as well, then I would probably suggest that you do some of these things like what we're doing tonight, right? Where you can be together, but everybody's in the room. You know, an outside facilitator is a useful thing, right? Because we can say things and make you really dig in deep and think about some things, and then we get to walk away. And you're not holding any grudges, you know. It doesn't seem like somebody's picking on anybody, right?
Right. And we've been for this for 2 years. So this is brilliant. I love this. I think this is great.
Yeah, and you know, one of the things we know about adult learning is you don't get to come to the table and think you know everything you needed to know. It just isn't true, right?
Right.
There's learning that goes on constantly, whether it's topical or it's learning tonight about each other and what it looks like to be a more effective team. And so, you know, maybe as we wrap up the evening, one of the things I'm going to suggest a few other things that will help you. And then maybe what we ought to talk about is what might be a next step to keep you on this road so that we can move you into those higher levels of group development. So let's do this. We're getting close to the halfway point. Some of you are probably thinking, my God, we haven't even started into the content and we're already halfway through, but it's okay, because I think for this group, this conversation has been very healthy. I think it helps us set the stage. So why don't I, let me advance my slide. Why don't I do the first one of these 4 dimensions, and then we'll take our break, and then we'll come back and work on the last 3. Does that sound fair? Or does anybody need to do their, okay. All right, so This comes from the Iowa Lighthouse research study. And imagine that in all these years of education, there's been a ton of research about the impact that superintendents and principals and teachers all have on student achievement. But until the early 2000s, there was none of that about what boards did and how they could have an impact on student achievement. And that impact could be positive or negative. And so our counterparts in Iowa, the School Boards Association, put this study together with their Department of Education and Iowa University and their Superintendents Association. And they did the only real comprehensive research out there about school boards. And so all of these things that we're going to talk about, all 4 of these items come from that work. So having a unity of purpose, have a very clear understanding of the roles and responsibilities between the superintendent and the board members, and then making sure that things are in place like a positive governing body culture. Some people call those norms, the way we work together with each other, and then the supportive structures we can put in place to help support that work that we do. And so some people call those protocols or operating procedures. So those are the 4 things we're going to talk about. And so let's do the unity of purpose. Let me advance that slide. And I'm not going to ask anybody to read this. I think you can do that. And based on what I heard in your comments from the group development conversation, it sounds like, to me, we don't have a unity of purpose. I mean, we know we're here to do good things for students, but that's about as far as it goes, without goals and those other pieces. So am I wrong in that? Did I not hear correctly, or would most of you say, nope, that's what we said?
I would say
I
we
think
don't
that's
have a
what we
unity
said.
of purpose.
Oh, who
Sorry,
said-
Cindy.
No, go ahead.
I didn't mean to overstep. I just was saying that I don't think we have a unity of purpose.
That's what I agree.
Okay, and so,
Because a lot of assumptions are still being made. That's why.
and so what do you have right now? I heard some discussion about we don't have goals. We haven't really had goals.
We don't have a vision or a statement. We don't have goals. I mean, this is basically one of just a few trainings that we've had as a board. So where do you start from? We had a meeting that we threw out our own personal goals that we thought should be happening, but it's hard to start anywhere without even one goal or a vision. We don't have a vision. We could start there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you don't have a vision. Do you have a mission statement?
Yeah, no, the school district does. I
Okay.
don't know if anybody could recite it.
Okay, okay, so that's a good question, right? And it's
But
not
that
even,
mission,
it's not even so much about memorizing it, but could you share it? And that's the important part. I always think about a vision, right? I don't care so
But-
much if the exact words are there, but do you have an understanding of what it is and you could explain it to someone else?
Debbie, that mission is old, as same as our bylaws and our policies. They're outdated. It's not. I mean, we could use the same mission, but it really is old. It's outdated.
Be careful throwing that word around, Beth.
The old word?
Well, Mr. Holman, I'm up there too,
Seasoned.
so I'm
They're
not young
seasoned.
myself.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I was just gonna say, and I think that kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier, in that, like, when I originally came on the board, many years ago, the structure was there. We fit into the structure. We learned the structure. But recently, the structure kind of went to the wayside. And so no one really has it. And like I said, it's no one's fault, but we really are starting at basics. I do agree there. Normally you'd fall into place and there was no place to fall into. There was no solid foundation,
Agreed.
in my opinion. So we're all trying. I think we're all trying. I'm trying to be fair, or attempted to be as fair as I possibly can with all 7 of us or 6 of us. But the intent only gets us so far. No, we have to do the work.
Right. And so let me say this, there's a couple of different ways that boards go about coming up with a unity of purpose. So they can do what we would call simple goal setting, where you would get together, right, as a governance team. So again, with Angel, and you would do some work ahead of time to bring forth some information kind of as this is where we are today, right? So we'd have a little bit of data to use for the conversation, although that's not usually the way it happens. That's the way it should happen. And then we would go about coming to some agreement around some basic goals. They would usually be short-term in nature, probably 1 year. And they would get you through until you were ready to undertake a process that we call strategic planning that would be much more comprehensive in nature. My question to you is, if you don't have goals in place right now, what are you using in that section of the superintendent evaluation tool that requires evaluation around the progress towards the district-wide goals?
I can answer that, Debbie. This Beth. We haven't had goals. As long as I've been on the board, we haven't had goals. And I have been unable to fill out that section.
So I would say in the absence of goals, there are district priorities that could be measured. When there are no specific goals, the district still has a purpose that has to move forward, and those priorities could be measured.
And so who identified the priorities? Was that work you did, Angel, and your team, or was that something?
I would share the priorities. I shared the priorities just recently with the board when we had a study session of and identified timeframes on the priorities. And then we started the conversation about bringing data together for goals.
Okay. And so, like I said, that's usually what I would consider sort of a basic level, right? That you're simply setting goals each year. And then the next year you kind of restart the process, right? And you continue to do that over time. The other option, like I said, is called strategic planning. It's a much more comprehensive approach. It usually is highly inclusive. And honestly, for this group, a divided board, believe it or not, and I promise you that I know what I speak of, it can actually bring a divided board together. Because what happens is that you include all these other voices in the process through input, through a retreat process, and your community helps you determine what are the beliefs of the community around education. What is the actual mission of this school district? Like, what is our core purpose? What do we want to be in the future? And that's the vision piece, right? That's the piece that you'll never get to if you just simply do annual goal setting, right? You need to know what it is you're trying to attain as a greater whole. And then from that, you determine, looking at all of the data available in a lot of different areas, and we can have that conversation another time, but what are the goals that are going to help us reach that vision that the community and we together have said we want for this school district?
Debbie, can I ask you a question? This is Debbie.
Yep.
I know the first year we were all new on the board. We tried to, like Cindy said, we had no structure. We just we went with the flow. We tried to get committees and so on and so forth. And at the end of the year, when it was time to evaluate, we had a change in administration, and we just evaluated on the data that we received minus the goals. And then the second year for me, is I can say, was pandemic, and I just took everything that Angel has done during COVID and everything, and I chalked that up as a goal when I evaluated him at the end of last year. So we're still, do you find that in a lot of the school districts that the goals were sort of looked over maybe last year because of COVID?
COVID's been a difficult wrinkle in it, no matter what. Even if you had a strategic plan in place for districts, some of them have fared better, and others have honestly said, you know what, we got totally sidetracked. We got to figure out how to get back on board, right? And then everywhere in between. So, you know, it's one of the reasons you put the vision in place, right? So you still always know what it is you're working towards. But knowing that it's a living, breathing plan, and things will happen that get in your way at times, and you have to find ways around it, right? Or you might have to put something on hold until, you know, you can work your way through something, and then you can get back on target with that particular goal. But you always know where you're headed, even if it's paused. And you know, that's something that I have seen. And so imagine that in my own district, we did not have a strategic plan when I came on board. I went to an MASB event and I learned about what strategic planning was. And I came back very excited. And I had a superintendent at the time who there was no way he was going to give up any kind of control. And so I just kind of put that information aside. And then when we hired a new superintendent, one of the first candidates that we were interviewing talked about strategic planning, and my antenna went right up. Well, lo and behold, we hired that superintendent. We brought strategic planning to the district, and I have been gone from that district for 10 years, and they are on their 5th iteration of a strategic planning process. So imagine 5 years for each plan, right? We're talking about 25 years later, that district, it has become a way of life. Like the community expects to be a part of it. The employees expect that this is how we're going to operate, because we all own where we're headed. And we all want to make sure we get there. That's the power of a strategic plan versus simple goal setting, is that everybody knows where we're headed and everybody wants to make sure it happens. And then you use that plan as the basis for your decisions. So now when you're discussing something at the board table, you're constantly asking yourself, is a decision I'm being asked to make move us towards our vision? Is it achieve one of the goals? If so, then I vote on it. I vote yes. And if it doesn't, then I ask myself and the superintendent, why are we discussing this? And why are you asking for this decision if it's not moving us in that direction? Now, if that's the case, do you see how a split board can move towards being a much more cohesive board?
Debbie,
You've all agreed on what your vision is, right?
Debbie, can I ask you a question?
Yep.
So we're almost a year into COVID, and my feeling at this point is COVID shouldn't be an excuse at this point for us not to have this done. Like I know things are difficult, but they're difficult for our students who are virtual, our students, specifically 9 months, 10 months. You know, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, parents, students. I mean, the board has to come together, and we can't keep using COVID as an excuse, is my feeling.
Yeah, and so, you know, I think that this board could come together around some basic goals that could get you through until a time when it's more appropriate to do a full-fledged strategic plan, which we expect to happen in the fall. We have a couple of districts who are sort of using a hybrid process right now because they have deadlines they need because of bond issues or closing buildings or something like that. And so, you know, this timing of spring is very important, even if they have to do some work virtually. But what I would say is we have a lot of districts who have been kind of on that pause button, and they're saying in the fall, we can't pause any longer. We want to start a process and move forward so that it's ready for us as we move into the budget season and we make decisions, you know, moving forward. Most districts undertake a strategic planning process in the fall or after the holidays, the Christmas holidays, because it's about a 4 to 5 month process. And so you wrap it up pretty much in that first semester or in the second semester. And, you know, so I think you could come together on some basic goals in the meantime with a facilitated conversation if you feel that that's necessary. And then, like I said, then talking about what does this process look like? And is this something this district would benefit from and this board would benefit from? Because I do believe that this is actually going to be a double benefit for your district. I mean, Angel had already expressed interest in a strategic plan when we talked initially. So I know your superintendent has some interest in going down this path, but I do think it would be helpful for this board, especially to have that unity of purpose.
And my COVID excuse was for the end of last year when we were doing his evaluation. I know we have to move forward. I was just asking.
Oh, I wasn't
About-
accused,
Oh, yeah,
Debbie.
no, I was just asking about, you know, last year, that's what I pretty much evaluated on is his ability to get us through this COVID thing. But yes, I believe we have to do goals this
Yeah,
year. I
and-
just didn't know.
And honestly, to be perfectly frank with you guys, your whole team is pretty new.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Whether we're talking board members or superintendent, this is a young team. You don't have anyone, Cindy, with the exception, because Cindy, you said you served before,
Yeah.
right? But then you've been off, you know, but with the exception of that, this is who has built a working relationship over time and who has developed all of these skill sets, right? That comes with this work. You're all sort of learning this together. And so there's a few missteps and that's okay. And we don't need to look back. And somebody said that this is a district that has a tendency to look back. Here's where we are, folks. What happened in the past doesn't matter.
Debbie,
Yes.
in all honesty, I believe as a board, the group that we got right here, I believe we can be a good board. I think we can be one unit. Like I said, we just got to stop. If you have questions or whatever, bring it to us. Don't take it to the city on your Facebook pages and get a bunch of bad input. I'm not saying everybody's got bad input, but it's our decision. So let's talk among ourselves instead of everybody else, please.
Well, you have to learn to depend on each other.
Yep.
Right? That this is where your strength can come from if you allow that to happen, but it takes work. It's not going to happen overnight, and you have to want it badly because you understand that your community needs this group to be an effective governance team. Right? There's plenty of examples for your community about, you know, dysfunction, right? At all levels. You can point to any governing body these days and see plenty of it. You want to be the exception to that. You want to show your community that they can trust in your decision-making and that you have the best interests of the district at heart, even when you disagree, right, on the way to get there. Because you still have, you have shown that you respect each other and that you want to move forward together. All right, so we're at the 7:30 mark and I promised you a break. So how long do you guys want to take for a break? Is 10 minutes good?
Yeah.
Is that enough
More
time?
than enough for me.
Okay, so go ahead.
I was just gonna ask the question because I keep thinking this is a casual meeting and so in my mind's eye, I have to get back to following the rules. And Miss Beaver had reminded me that even in these things, I guess we're supposed to take roll call for a break, or is this casual enough?
Oh,
that
no,
we
this is
don't need
casual.
to?
You don't need to do that.
Okay,
You've
thank you.
turned it over to me and I'm the facilitator at the moment, so you don't
Got
need to
it.
worry about that.
Deal.
You've done the two things that you have to do to keep this legal. You
Okay.
did your roll call and you asked for public comment.
What I
That's all
would
I'm
ask
concerned about.
is if you're going to recess, just mute your devices and turn off your cameras. That way, when you step away, we don't inadvertently leave our cameras or on.
Good
Yeah, so
choices, Angel.
7:43, you
All
want
right.
to 7:43?
Yep, sounds good.
Okay, I'm gonna pause.